Hello everybody, it's Julia here from the Highly Sensitive Tarot. It's been a while since I've had my face on camera and it nearly didn't happen today. I got up with every intention of doing some videos today and had just got my hair all covered in conditioner, all sort of pre-soaking, ready for the shower, and my power went off. So I spent an hour pacing around, quite chilly and getting grumpy really, because I didn't think the power was going to come back on. I'd had a text to say that power wouldn't come back on until sort of mid-afternoon, so I really didn't think I was going to get to do these videos, but then the power just came back on and I was able to get showered and get done. But that has thrown me today and stressed me out a little bit. So I've just done a video on my favourite court cards, and I think the first 10 minutes of it I couldn't even get my voice to work right. I couldn't even get the words out properly. But anyway, I think I've settled down a little bit now, and the video that I now want to do for you is a follow-up to my walkthrough and first impressions of the Pensive Path Tarot, which I absolutely love. It's my current deck study. I only received this deck in the post a couple of weeks ago. It's newly released by Reese Marren from the Curated Card, and I don't have the words actually to describe the effect that it has on me. From the moment I first saw this deck on Martin at Martin's Musings channel, I just became quite hooked on it really. And so what I decided to do after that walkthrough and first impressions video was to use the deck as a deck study for myself over a period of probably 30 days it will probably be, and I'm about day 9 into that at the moment. Every day I'm trying to ask the deck another question, a different question, and I'm asking all kinds of questions just because I want to understand the deck. You know, I want to test, I suppose, the extent, the perimeters, the boundaries, I want to see what the deck can tell me, what I can intuit from it. And so one of the things that I decided to do was a deck interview, which I've not done on any of my decks so far. And as you can see, I've got quite a lot. I've got another box here and another box down there. I've got probably around 60 decks altogether, but this is my first proper indie deck, and it's the first deck that the longer I look at it, the more questions I have, I guess, is what I want to say. Yeah, that's what it is. The longer I look at this deck, the more questions I have about it. And that hasn't happened with any of these other decks. You know, there's been some decks that I've been able to get out of the box and just read with, and there's been other decks that I've wanted to sit and spend a little bit of time with and read the guidebook and soak them up a little bit. But this deck, almost every single card, it's just like the longer I stare at the cards, the more questions I have about the images and the feel of the cards. So that's why I decided to do a deck interview. And I realise there's many different versions of deck interviews out there. This particular one I found on Pinterest a year or so ago, but haven't actually used it up until now. So I did this deck interview 2 or 3 days ago, and I wanted to share it with you as part of my deck study. I hope that in another 2 or 3 weeks, when I come to the end of my deck study, I might be able to do another video, just a third video as like a follow-up, just to try and give some more insights and thoughts and feelings and discoveries about this deck. So anyway, without further ado, the first question in the deck interview is describe yourself. So it's Pensive Path, please describe yourself to me. What card represents you? And I picked out the Knight of Pentacles, which I thought was really interesting actually. I mean, this is obviously an earth-based card. I have got some notes down here on the table of my thoughts and feelings about what I discovered in this deck interview, so I will look down and look at that a fair bit. But yeah, I thought interesting because this is an earth-based card. Obviously it's a slow moving energy. The Knight of Pentacles is the slowest moving knight in the deck generally, and I sort of wondered what that might mean in terms of this deck, and I think I thought in the end really that perhaps this reflects that sort of the feeling that I get that it's going to take time to get to know this deck, that this is not a deck that I can rush with, that will be particularly dynamic in any way. It's not going to be an all bells and whistles, flashy sort of deck like maybe the Knight of Swords. It's not going to be a deck of sharp intellect. It's going to be a slow, steady growth, a good, solid, reliable deck. Really, I think is the impression that I got from it. Not a show off. You know, it's going to be a deck that will take its time to make an impression. Not that it hasn't already made an impression, because it really has, big style, but it will take time for me to fully appreciate the information, I think, the archetypes and the information that is in the cards. So yeah, I hope I've explained that properly. So card number 2 is, what is your strength as a deck? And I picked out the Ace of Cups, which this one didn't require nearly as much thinking about as the Knight of Pentacles. This was just like, yes, I totally get this as a strength for this deck, because most of the questions that I ask and most of the questions that it prompts in me are emotional questions. They're about how I feel, whether I'm comfortable, whether I'm not, whether I'm happy, whether I'm sad. This deck very much has a strong emotional feel about it. You know, these are all individual, original artworks. There's no real traditional symbology that you would expect to see in tarot cards, that you see in a sort of standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck. There's none of that symbology. There's not particularly any religious aspects to these cards. They are just works of art, and their emotional energy is what speaks to me, I think. So I'd written here in my notes that this deck is all about emotional energy, and that it is emotionally available on all levels. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And it also, with the cup here being held out in the hand, it is like I said, I just want to stare at these cards for quite long periods sometimes. I found myself sat here just turning them over one after the other, just pondering, you know, not having any real clear idea of what I'm looking at, what I'm thinking about, but just seeing what insights come to me. And it is like I want to immerse myself in it. It is a very fluid energy that it's almost like I want to drink it up and just absorb it fully. So this card makes a lot of sense. What is your weakness as a deck? And we got the Page of Swords here. And this is one of the cards that even when I first flicked through the deck, I was struggling to really quite make sense of this piece of artwork. You know, we've got a little boy here. He's rubbing his toes. They look very sore, very cold. He doesn't look very happy. There's an axe in the background. It all looks quite barren, quite bare, quite cold. He looks kind of neglected, I suppose, in a way, doesn't he? He doesn't look very well cared for. I don't know. So as a weakness for this deck, and what I'd written in my notes is that this deck, because it's so intuitive and so emotional, I think that it has the potential to be quite brutal. I think it has the potential to I've written the words down, cold and hurtful, because that's what I'm feeling from this card. But I don't necessarily think that this deck is cold or hurtful, but I think that there is definitely the possibility, there's definitely the potential that some of the messages that will come through from this deck could be hurtful. They could be brutal, they could be painful, they could be emotionally painful. It's difficult, isn't it? Because traditionally I think of the Page of Swords as being somebody who is like your inner detective. It's like somebody who just won't shut up, who just asks lots and lots of questions, who's just relentless in their pursuit of understanding and information. And maybe that's what happened with this boy here. Maybe he just, maybe he was on a quest for some information, for some knowledge, and he just ignored the fact that his feet were getting colder and more painful. And perhaps that's the message here, is that if you're not careful, if you don't remember to pay attention to your emotions, you could end up just chasing information for information's sake, I guess, with this deck. I don't know how that makes sense to other people, but it kind of makes sense to me, I think. I'm probably just not explaining it very well. So question number 4, and I think this is a good example actually of how this deck can be quite brutal. Actually, question number 4 is describe me. So I'm asking the deck to describe me. What does the deck think about me? And I guess being a Virgo, I was hoping to see the Hermit or the 9 of Pentacles or something nice like that, really. But what actually came out was the 5 of Cups. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that sort of made me go, oh. But actually, the deck is quite right. Although this is not me wholeheartedly through and through, this is an aspect of me and has been an aspect of me for some time. This sort of, not necessarily crying over spilt milk, but having trouble seeing the positive in situations, you know, getting bogged down in the negative, getting bogged down in the despair, the hopelessness. The last 2 or 3 years have been really difficult years for me. In one way or another, I've had some big changes, a lot of issues with my health to get my head around, and I have suffered with my mood, with depression on and off for years, to be honest anyway. So yeah, I can totally see why this deck would come up, why this particular deck also would come up with the 5 of Cups for me, because as I said, what this deck does is it really it forces you to confront yourself, I think, to confront your frailties, your flaws, the things that you struggle with. I think it really does force you to look at those things, and this certainly had quite an emotional effect on me when I turned the card over, and it was just sort of like, oh, you know, couldn't it have been a brighter, more positive card? But actually, that's a challenge to me, isn't it? To look in the mirror and to think, well, perhaps I could be brighter and more positive about certain aspects of my life sometimes. So yeah, I can take this card. That's fine. So question number 5. There's 7 questions, by the way. Question number 5 is, what can you teach me? Which is a really interesting question. And for that, I drew the Tower, which again just made sense to me almost immediately. I think that's a brilliant energy. I love the swirling, building energy of the Tower there. It's like at any moment the electricity, the lightning could strike that tower and it will fall. And in my notes, I actually wrote, for what can you teach me? I wrote that you can help me to break down old beliefs, that you can help me to dismantle the things that no longer serve me, you know, that you can help me to heal my life by giving me breakthroughs and insights and flashes of inspiration, flashes of insight and understanding. But I think mainly through the dismantling of things that are difficult and toxic and that no longer serve me in life. So really, really pleased to see that card there, actually. I think that's brilliant. Question number 6 is, how can I best learn from and collaborate with you, this deck? And what a fantastic card. I got the 3 of Pentacles here, which is somewhat morbid and unpleasant in this card because it's a group of people getting together to perform an autopsy, to dissect and understand a body, I guess, which is not very pleasant. But the feel of this card, this collaboration, this desire to understand, become skilled, become knowledgeable, to learn from other people, it just fits really well, doesn't it? This is the card of collaboration, isn't it, really, in my mind? And that was what the question was. How can I best learn from and collaborate with you? And it is really like this card here, by getting into the nitty-gritty of this deck and not being afraid to face some of the darker aspects of this deck, not being afraid to get my hands dirty, if you like, with my own emotional state. This is a deck about learning about myself, isn't it, I guess? And I think that I think this is a brilliant deck to do that with. So yeah. And the last question, which again is a fantastic card I drew here. The last question is, what is the potential of our relationship? What is the potential of our relationship? And I drew the moon. Look at that, look. What a beautiful card there, the moon. You can just see that little crescent moon shining up the top there, and it's making everything silvery and somehow blurred and distorted and shimmery, and there's a real illusionary feel to this card, isn't there, as we would expect from the moon. So what is the potential of our relationship? And I'd written here in my notes that this deck could really give me the opportunity to see myself fully, to really see myself, you know, to develop my intuition even further. Because as I said, there's no symbology within this deck to fall back on. There's no religious symbols. There's no particular astrology within this deck. It is the artwork images and what you feel and intuit from them. So I think it will really help me to develop my intuition, but I also feel that, as I've drawn the moon card here, that because I like to think of the moon as being like the silvery face, the silvery reflection of the sun. So it's a reflection of yourself, isn't it? It's something that you can see yourself in, the moon, or that you need to learn to see yourself in, actually, because it's often kind of distorted in some way, I suppose, the image that the moon gives back to you. It's not always truly accurate, I guess. So yeah, I see this as being like the silver face of the sun, the silver mirror of the sun, and I think that this deck will really help me to develop my intuition and to really be able to look at myself fully in that mirror, in that silvery mirror, to look at my ego, to look at myself, to look at who I am, what I am, where I'm going, all the big questions, all the big philosophical questions, the big metaphysical questions. I think that they're all here actually to be had within this deck. So yeah, 7 questions there. They all make so much sense to me, the answers that this deck has given me. If you've got this deck yourself, I would highly recommend that you do a deck interview yourself with it and see what kind of relationship you're developing with this deck, how the deck perceives you. It's quite an interesting thing. But yeah, I probably won't be reading any public readings with this deck for some time. Like I said, I want to do my month's deck study, and I hope to come back then at the end of that month with some more insights and some more thoughts about the deck, and then we'll see. I think it will be a brilliant deck for shadow work and for certain types of readings, but certainly not your everyday reading. This is not a light deck by any means. There's very, very few cards in this deck that have any real lightness to them. They are all quite deep, immersive, reflective, subjective, yeah, intuitive cards. I think it really is a deck. I mean, the question, what is your strength as a deck? And I got the Ace of Cups here. It is like I want to just lift the cup and drink from it. It's like I want to just immerse myself in the energy of this deck. I just think it's beautiful. I'm so grateful to Reese Marren for creating this deck. And yeah, I would love to hear your comments in the comments box if any of you have got any thoughts about these cards, or if you've done an interview with this deck yourself, it would be great to hear about it. But otherwise, I shall hopefully see you in 2 or 3 weeks' time with probably the third and last part of this little in-depth look at the Pensive Path Tarot. So thank you for being here with me. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, it would be great if you would do so. My subscriber numbers have grown hugely recently, and it's been an enormous bit of validation, really, I suppose, for my efforts. So so thanks very much for that, and I hope to see you again soon.